Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is Monday, March 22nd, is around 10:14 a.m. here in San Diego, California. Today on In the Fight, I am very excited to talk and speak with this guest. There's a lot of accolades I could probably provide. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He is one half of the Kenny Florian podcast, which, by the way, I'm thinking we're going to have to workshop that to Florian and Anik podcast, because I don't know how the TV guy gets to go in front of the fighter himself. We had John on our show last week. We're gonna have to swap that around. But
that's funny.
Today, ladies and gentlemen, on In the Fight with Bo Templin, I have former UFC superstar, UFC legend, UFC commentator, and color analyst Kenny Florian. Thank you so much for coming on today. I'm excited to do this.
Appreciate the intro, man. Happy to be here.
Okay, so I'm glad we got off to a good start here with the name of the podcast. How is the podcast? Just like from a content creation side of things, not even fight related.
Right. No, it's been going great. Honestly, John really was the guy with the idea. He proposed this to me many years ago, and then after some encouragement and discussions back and forth, we decided to do it. So really it's John's baby, his idea. I'm glad we did it. I have no problems with Anik going first as far as name goes, of course. And we've been having a blast, man. For a lot of these pre and post fight shows that we used to do, you really don't have a whole lot of time to go into some of these fights with depth. And I think the podcast kind of provided both John and I a chance to kind of go into things a little bit deeper and especially maybe a day or two removed from the fights. Your perception of fights might be a little bit different, for better or worse, but you take things in a little bit better, and you can have longer discussions in the podcast, which has been great for both John and I.
Well, I think you bring up a great point. Kind of two different routes here we could go. One, like, look, Adesanya Blachowicz, right? In the moment, it's a close fight.
Right.
Like, to say either way, I have no problem if someone thought Adesanya edged him out, or if you thought Blachowicz won 4-1. I really don't have an issue with it. So going back, rewatching that fight, those are the exact kind of fights that we need to go back, rewatch. And honestly, at times we can be hard on the judges, but that's a close fight, right? And if we need multiple viewings to see it, it makes a little sense why at times judges kind of get different looks.
Absolutely. We don't have that luxury. And, I think we can kind of go in a little bit further and say, these guys don't have the luxury of replays. They don't have the luxury of monitors where they're going to get the optimal angles or many of the optimal angles of the fight. These guys are in fixed positions on certain parts of the octagon where they may or may not be seeing everything. So that's a difficult thing. Watching the fight in person from a specific angle on the cage is very different than watching it on a TV monitor as well.
So, Kenny, you are like historically great at the fight IQ level of the sport. And the sport itself is so young. It's so new, right? Like in the scheme of history, in the scheme of sports history, basketball, baseball, American football has been, decades, if not centuries long histories. UFC, not exactly that way.
Yeah.
Do you ever have a hard time, like, explaining things at an elementary level? Because you have all these different thoughts going on in your head, whereas I feel like a lot of the consumers of the UFC or MMA in general, like, they're watching it on such a more basic level. Do you ever have a hard time kind of like dumbing it down for people like me?
No. I mean, listen, I think that if you know it, if you truly know it well enough, you should be able to explain it to anybody. That's my feeling anyway. Some things are more complicated than other things, but if I'm not able to dumb it down in certain instances, it's probably something on me more than it is on something on an audience member. Now, I should be able to see much more and see it on much deeper level, but as far as explaining it to things, I hope, and my goal is always to be able to explain things on a level that anybody can understand. And I think that's kind of the goal for any analyst, commentator, or instructor. Now, I kind of try to talk about more the technical side of things. I think a lot of commentators and, people who are in the fight game explain the physical side of things. Look how fast he is, or, oh my gosh, he's so explosive. Now, there's so much more going on, which I don't think is kind of given credit to. So I try to explain more that side of things to people if I can.
Sure. It's so interesting. I was talking about this with my dad the other day, and we were just talking about like how fighters evolve or athletes just evolve in general. We were talking about not even like the Jordan LeBron debate per se, but we were just saying that, generally athletes do get, GSP brought it up. Athletes, they're going to get faster, stronger. They're going to perform better. And the athletes of yesterday aren't as good as the athletes of today. And the athletes of tomorrow will be better than today. But I also feel like your fight IQ is so high, and you were fighting in a younger era of the sport. Do you ever think like your game is suited better for today's MMA than it was maybe of like the MMA of old?
Yeah, I think that, for many aspects of highly technical sports, information is king. And I think it's the people and a lot of different things, not just sports, but business or anything. If you have information that other people just do not, that is a huge advantage. Now, as far as today's game being compared, I agree with some of what GSP says. In theory, that's exactly what should happen. Do I feel that overall the sport is improving? Sure. But in some ways it's regressing. I feel like people can get satisfied. And I think in a lot of different ways, we can get satisfied and think like, okay, we have it figured out. And, I'm going to try to fight like this guy, or I'm going to fight like that guy. When in reality, we need to consistently push the boundaries of what we know and what we think we know. And I think, looking at things from, their perspective of like first principles, or, trying to break it down and look at things from a different perspective, I think is something that a lot of fighters could do today. I think so many fighters look the same today. I think that if you went back in my day, you could see very distinct styles, for better or worse. Doesn't necessarily make it better or anything like that. But I think in today's game, so many fighters are looking the same where, I think that there's no, how do you do things differently, or how do you separate yourself if you're just looking like everybody else? And I would argue that if you look at the very tippy top of the divisions, the Adesanyas, the Jan Blachowicz, certain guys, let's say a Max Holloway, they're doing things a little bit differently than everybody else. And I think that's what's separating them. So again, the information, the creativity, pushing those boundaries is what's going to separate the elite from the okay. In regards to me, I guess, I feel like, I've evolved to the point where in theory, maybe my body, but maybe my mind would be fine in today's game. And I think I still feel like I look for ways to improve myself and look for ways to improve my fighters or the guys that I work with as much as possible.
So you brought up, Max Holloway, and this is something I kind of wanted to do with you. 2021 has been off to such, really the last 365 days for MMA and the UFC in general, just like has been incredible for the sport. Mm-hmm. I would love to run through what has happened so far this year and just moments that stand out to you. And then look at maybe the next like month or two ahead, because like after the last week, whether it's like the Khabib confirmed retirement, and then we get our lightweight title bout. So let's start by looking at some of the early moments of this year. Ones that stand out to me would be Holloway's like no look punch, the most strikes ever recorded in a UFC fight. McGregor Poirier stands out to me. Chandler's KO over Hooker. So maybe just looking at like some of those, and then maybe Usman's third round TKO finish over Gilbert Burns.
Let's do it, man.
Okay, so with the Max Holloway one, can he break that record again? Is that the most punches we will ever see in a UFC fight? I never thought it was possible to get even that high. So I'm clearly an idiot. Can it be done? I'm serious,
no,
Kenny.
Listen,
I don't think that's idiotic.
I don't think that's idiotic at all. I think a lot of people were pretty surprised by that statistic. Max Holloway is a guy who is pushing the boundaries and looking for ways to get better. And, he's still young, of course, but why is it that we put these, restrictions on what we're capable of doing? I think that as soon as we do that and we say, oh, this will never be beaten, we're limiting ourselves. So I think a Max Holloway kind of guy, if there's someone who's going to break it, it's probably going to be someone like a Max Holloway. The guy doesn't stop. And you mentioned Chandler earlier. He's another guy that really doesn't get tired and can really keep a very high volume count. But certainly Max Holloway is a guy that, comes in tremendous shape. He's always ready for the most part, assuming there's no injuries. And yeah, why not? Sure. I think what he did is mind-boggling, but I do think that it can be broken. You're going to have to keep a pace that is insane, but hey, I don't think a lot of people thought Max Holloway would be able to do what he did in his last fight.
The other thing, and many people have brought this up, so I'm not the first to say this, but I do think it's important. You also need the right dance partner, because not many guys are going to take that many blows. A lot of props to Calvin for incredible durability and toughness.
It's a salient point. I think that Calvin Kattar unfortunately suffers from a footwork issue, and everyone's talking about the output and all that stuff. Listen, if my coach is holding pads for me and not moving at all, I could do an insane punch count as well, especially with a guy like Max Holloway who's extremely efficient. So you need the right dancing partner. Unfortunately for Kattar, it meant that he wasn't going to move very much. And if you're not moving very much, then you can hit that target repeatedly. So absolutely, you are correct. You need the right dance partner. So all those things really synergize in that fight with Holloway and Kattar.
So I'd love to look at the Michael Chandler side of things now. Obviously, incredible first performance with the UFC. Now, though, he's getting his title shot. Like, I don't know if we've ever seen someone get the title shot as quickly as he has, but his performance kind of proved it. What can people look at from his fight with Hooker that you think will translate over to his fight with Oliveira, or should they completely kind of avoid it because every fight is different?
I would say every fight is different. I think that it was a nice prep for Oliveira, who will be taller than Chandler. Oliveira is pretty tall and lanky, perhaps not on the level of Daniel Hooker, but I think in that regard things will be interesting. But Hooker does not have the submission skills that Oliveira has, and he certainly doesn't have the same kind of striking style. I think Oliveira has a very interesting striking style, more of a traditional Muay Thai background, it seems to me, than kind of a stick and move style that Hooker has. So in some ways it favors Chandler, in some ways it does not, because Chandler also does a lot of his best work after getting a takedown. I'm not sure he's going to take that risk against someone like Oliveira. He may, but Oliveira poses a lot of problems that Hooker did not. Chandler just happened to really take full advantage of the limelight when he came in that spot against Hooker and made the most out of it. Chandler is a very marketable guy. He's a good-looking, strong guy who also was a champion in another organization. So, I think because of Poirier and McGregor's history and the fact that both of those guys, it seems, wants the trilogy fight, it really opened the door both for Oliveira and Chandler. Oliveira was on a tremendous streak, but didn't have the same quality of competition than, say, some of the other guys. So it really was the perfect storm for both of those guys, and I think we'll get a great fight because of it.
Very, very exciting. The last one that I wanted, or actually, if you don't mind, I got two more for you.
Sure.
Something to look for that's going to be different in the second fight between Masvidal and Usman. And then to follow up after that, I would love to just, what can we expect from TJ Dillashaw, Corey Sandhagen? I'm really torn on that because I just don't know what TJ will look like. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on those two fights, differences between fight one and fight two for Masvidal and Usman, and then the Corey Sandhagen, what to look for almost in that first minute that could be telling for us from the TJ Dillashaw side of things.
Sure. So I'll start with Usman and Masvidal. I think that, I hate, talking about the late notice thing, but that's a real thing. Masvidal got that fight on short notice, and it doesn't take away from Usman's performance. But as far as Masvidal, I think Masvidal would have been way more active and way more aggressive had he had a full camp to prepare for that fight. Now, he was preparing for it at a certain point, but also I think he probably ramped it back down and wasn't training when the fight was given to someone else. So taking the fight on short notice, dealing with the long flight, certainly has its effects on fighters. Okay, that is just a very real thing. Usman was able to push the pace on Masvidal. Usman seemed to get better as the fight went on. Usman's such a strong wrestler that he really did a great job of taking Masvidal out of his game. But I think we would have seen a more aggressive Masvidal had he had more time to prepare. He did a good job with his wrestling, but he didn't do a great job with his wrestling. But I think we saw a Masvidal that was way more toned down and was less aggressive. And I think this time out, I think we'd probably see a more aggressive Masvidal coming forward. Now, that also opens you up to takedowns as well. So I'm really interested to see how that second fight goes down. But I think we'll see a more Masvidal, a more aggressive Masvidal in that fight against Usman in the rematch. Now, in the Sandhagen fight, now you want to break down the Sandhagen-Edgar fight, or?
Oh, so really what I would like is just the question mark of TJ Dillashaw being gone so long. Sandhagen's last performance was ridiculous and nuts.
Yep.
I want to know what's something we can look for in the first minute or first 2 minutes of that fight that will tell us what to expect from TJ Dillashaw.
Well, you never know how someone's going to come back after being on a long layoff like TJ Dillashaw. Two things, and we just have to talk about it, okay? First of all, how does he come back? How much training did he do? How sharp did he keep his mind and body while he was away for those couple years? Number two, okay, when people are taking performance-enhancing drugs, you wonder about their mental state. When they entered a fight, were they relying on their performance-enhancing drugs to give them confidence? Like, let's say if you are taking something like, what was the thing that was helping him with?
EPO.
EPO. Okay, sorry. EPO. If you're taking something like EPO, which is going to give you clearly better conditioning, better anaerobic and aerobic conditioning, you can kind of rely on that to get you through a fight, knowing like, hey, I can go hard for 25 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever it is. Not having that for the first time, or I guess since him getting caught, what is that going to do for his approach in this fight? Is he going to keep that same pace that he's used to at 135 pounds? Is he going to be hesitant? Is he going to be questioning himself and his physicality in that fight against Sandhagen? And I think we'll probably see that perhaps on his face and in his body in those first couple minutes.
I'm almost guaranteed, I can almost guarantee this, that the body reader, or like the body language readers during the fight week, the weigh-ins, they're going to look, oh, his body looks blah, blah, blah. Oh, he looks good. He looks bad. At the stare down, right, they're going to talk about like, oh, he filled back up really well. Oh my God, he looks depleted. That's going to be really interesting. My last question, then I'll let you go. Yeah. I'm always fascinated by this because there are guys that do not make it to the UFC that are absolute killers and savages. You have been around the game a really long time. You've been around all facets of the game really for a really long time. Who is the best fighter that you know that the average Joe or average person does not know their name?
Gotcha. Well, I'll be blunt here. I'm pretty biased here because I do work with him, but Ryan Hall is one of those guys that may not be on the radar for the majority of fans. And maybe for good reason. He hasn't been as active as some of the other guys, but he is just a fighter that we just haven't seen a whole lot of his skills at this point. We've seen some of his skills, but I think he's a guy that if he was more active, and he hopes to be this year, I think people are going to really get on the Ryan Hall train and see how good and how unique he is, especially in that killer 145-pound division. So I think he's a guy that people should be watching for, and hopefully he gets healthy soon, and people get a chance to see him compete this year more often.
Kenny, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate every single question, every single answer, all 20 minutes of these, even though I said I was only going to take 15.
No worries.
best of luck here with the big fights coming up. Best of luck with the podcast and the show. I hope to talk to you again really, really soon because I appreciate this a ton.
My man, thanks so much.